The wind howled across the frozen wasteland of Vex 7, carrying crystals of ice that cut like microscopic blades. Marcus Chen adjusted his thermal suit's collar and squinted through the perpetual twilight that passed for day on this forsaken world. He'd been surveying mineral deposits for 3 weeks now, alone except for his AI companion and the occasional supply drop. That's when he saw them. At first he thought they were ice formations, peculiar sculptures created by the relentless wind. But ice formations didn't move. Ice formations didn't huddle together for warmth. Through his visor's enhanced vision, Marcus could make out 3 figures approximately 200 meters away. They were clustered near an outcropping of black rock, the only shelter visible for kilometers. As he approached cautiously, his heart rate climbing, he realized what he was seeing. An alien woman. He assumed female from the gentle, protective way she held the 2 smaller beings, crouched against the stone. Her species was unknown to him, though he'd studied xenobiology extensively during his training. She stood perhaps 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs that seemed too delicate for her frame. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent quality, shifting between deep purples and blues even as frost accumulated on her body. 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on her face, blinked slowly as she noticed his approach. The children, they had to be children, pressed against her sides. They were smaller, perhaps 4 feet tall, with the same iridescent skin though brighter, more vibrant. One of them was shivering violently. Marcus's translator crackled to life as the woman made a sound, something between a melody and a warning. His suit's AI worked frantically to decode it, but came up empty. No match in the database. Whatever species this was, humanity had never encountered them before. "Easy," Marcus said softly, raising his hand slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The woman's 4 eyes focused on him with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously exposed and understood. She made another sound, more desperate this time, and pulled her children closer. That's when Marcus noticed the wreckage. Behind the outcropping, partially buried in snowdrifts, lay the skeletal remains of a small spacecraft. Recent by the looks of it. The metal was still relatively clean, not yet consumed by Vex 7's corrosive ice storms. They must have crashed within the last few days. Marcus's mind raced. His survival shelter was 3 kilometers away. His rover parked another kilometer behind him. The temperature was dropping. It always dropped as Vex 7's dim sun descended toward the horizon. In 2 hours, it would hit -80 Celsius. Even in his advanced thermal suit, Marcus wouldn't last long in that. These beings, with no protection except their huddled bodies, would freeze long before then. The woman made another sound, weaker now. One of the children had stopped shivering. Marcus knew what that meant, the body's final surrender to hypothermia. He had minutes to decide. Every regulation screamed at him to call it in. Contact with an unknown species required protocols, committees, approvals. There were quarantine procedures, diplomatic considerations, biological hazard assessments. The bureaucratic machinery of the United Earth Space Agency moved slowly and deliberately for good reasons. But Marcus had spent enough time in space to know that sometimes regulations were written by people sitting in comfortable offices, not by people watching children freeze to death. He took 3 steps forward, moving slowly so as not to startle them. The woman tensed, and Marcus could see muscles coiling beneath her frost-covered skin. She was preparing to fight or flee, even though she was clearly too weak to do either effectively. "Come with me," Marcus said, knowing she couldn't understand the words but hoping his tone would convey his meaning. He pointed to himself, then gestured in the direction of his rover. "Come, shelter, warmth." The woman's 4 eyes studied him for what felt like an eternity. Marcus could see her calculating, weighing the risk of trusting this alien creature against the certainty of death if she stayed. Her children made the decision for her. The one who had stopped shivering made a weak sound, barely audible over the wind. She nodded, It was a human gesture, and Marcus wondered briefly if it meant the same thing in her culture, or if it was simply coincidence. But when she tried to stand, her legs buckled beneath her. Marcus moved without thinking. He closed the distance between them in seconds, catching her before she fell completely. She was surprisingly light despite her height, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. Her skin felt cold, dangerously cold, even through his gloves. "It's okay," he murmured, even though she couldn't understand. "I've got you." The children looked up at him with their multiple eyes, fearful but hopeful. Marcus made a decision that would probably cost him his career. He activated his suit's emergency beacon override, shutting off the automatic distress signal that would have alerted USA to his actions. Then he opened his thermal suit's outer layer and pulled the smaller child, the one who had stopped shivering, against his chest. The suit's built-in heating system kicked into overdrive. The woman made a sound, surprise, gratitude. Marcus couldn't tell, but she didn't pull her child away. "Can you walk if I help you?" Marcus asked, supporting her weight. She seemed to understand his intention, if not his words. With agonizing slowness, they began moving toward the rover. The other child followed, stumbling through the snow. Every few meters, Marcus had to stop, redistribute the weight, make sure no one was falling behind. His suit's power reserves were draining fast. Heating for two was never part of the design specifications. Warnings flashed across his visor's display. He ignored them all. It took 47 minutes to reach the rover. It should have taken 15. By the time Marcus got the woman and her children inside, his own fingers were starting to go numb despite the thermal protection. He cranked the rover's heating system to maximum and began the drive back to his shelter. The woman sat in the passenger seat, holding one child while the other, the one who had been against Marcus's chest, was starting to show signs of life again. Small movements, a slight color returning to the iridescent skin. Marcus allowed himself a small moment of relief. At the shelter, Marcus moved quickly. He'd never been more grateful for the redundant systems USA required in their remote stations. He set up the medical bay, adjusted the atmospheric composition to match what his suit's sensors had registered from the alien woman's breathing, and raised the temperature to what he hoped was comfortable for their biology. Over the next 3 hours, as warmth slowly returned to their bodies, Marcus watched them. The woman never fully let her guard down, but she allowed him to provide food, water, medical attention. The children, resilient in the way young ones always seem to be, recovered faster. They began exploring the shelter with curious eyes, touching surfaces, examining human technology with something approaching wonder. Marcus knew he should report this, knew that every moment he delayed was a violation of dozens of regulations. But as he watched the woman finally relax, saw her children playing together, alive, warm, safe, he found himself not caring about regulations at all. His translator eventually cracked their language. Simple at first, "Thank you, help safe." The woman's name was something his human vocal cords couldn't quite pronounce, but he settled on Lyra, and she seemed to accept it. Her children were Kai and Myra. They had been refugees, fleeing from something she couldn't quite explain. A war, maybe, or a natural disaster. Their navigation had failed, and they'd crashed on Vex 7 while trying to reach a colony world 3 systems away. "Why?" Lyra asked him, 3 days after he'd found them, her accent thick but comprehensible through the translator. "Why risk yourself for strangers?" Marcus thought about all the complex answers he could give. About humanity's hard-learned lessons from its own history of turning away refugees. About the philosophical frameworks and ethical systems he'd studied. About the simple mathematical reality that saving 3 lives was worth risking 1. Instead, he shrugged. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "Because your children were cold, because I could." Lyra's 4 eyes studied him with that same intensity from the first day. Then she did something that surprised him. She smiled. It was a distinctly alien expression, involving muscles that human faces didn't have, but Marcus understood it nonetheless. 2 weeks later, when USA finally sent a ship to investigate why his check-ins had become irregular, Marcus had his resignation prepared. He'd violated first contact protocols, ignored quarantine procedures, and shut off emergency systems. He was ready to face the consequences. But when Captain Rodriguez walked into his shelter and saw Kai and Myra playing a game they'd invented using human and alien toys, saw Lyra helping Marcus prepare a meal that combined their species' nutritional needs, the captain just sighed. "Got him at Chen," she said. "You've created an interstellar incident." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied. "First contact with a new species, and you handled it like a, Rodriguez struggled for words. "Like a human," Marcus offered. Rodriguez looked at him sharply, then at Lyra and her children, then back at Marcus. Finally, she shook her head with something that might have been exasperation or might have been admiration. "Yeah," she said. "Like a human, pack your things, all of you. We're taking you somewhere warmer." As the ship lifted off from Vex 7, leaving behind the frozen wasteland where 3 lives had nearly ended, Marcus looked out the viewport at the ice planet receding below. In the reflection, he could see Lyra standing behind him, one hand resting gently on his shoulder, a gesture of thanks that transcended species. Humanity had reached the stars carrying all its flaws and contradictions, but it had also brought something else, and stubborn, perhaps foolish insistence that when someone needed help, you helped them, no matter who they were, no matter what it cost. Some would call it naive, others would call it dangerous. Marcus Chen called it being human. And somehow that was enough. End.